How much faster is a professional motorcycle racer compared to a skilled track day rider? Today we're going to find out. This is Mischa, a fast track day rider in the advanced group at Almeria. And this is me, testing my British Superbike in 2017 before the season started. So let's go turn by turn to discover exactly where this time is lost. Okay, so we're coming across the start finish line here. I've tried to line our laps up as best I can, and here we go. So first thing to notice is that we're both in fourth gear approaching this corner down the start finish. Now our braking markers are almost identical. We're braking at the same point, but as we get further into this lap, I would imagine that I was travelling slightly faster at its speed when I approached there. So although we're braking at the same point, I've probably carried a few kilometres an hour on the way into the corner. Now this is the first important point, and all of this is advice that takes lots of years to practice and build up to, and a lot of trial and error, and probably a few crashes along the way to get to this point. I've been racing at this point for well over 10 years and definitely had my fair share of crashes to reach this level of understanding. But one of the most important things I'm going to do here, and I'll do this a lot around the lap, is braking harder upright when I'm in the safer part of the braking zone that I explained in some of my previous videos, and then as I release the brake into the corner, I'm releasing the brake and turning in, and as I turn in I get more engine braking, but I'm also releasing the front brake and then getting on the rear brake at the same time to help pull the bike into the corner. So what we're about to see here is me travelling faster into the corner but then turning in to help myself scrub the speed off with little front brake. Now one of the most important things here is our gears around the track. Now, my gear pattern isn't necessarily the same as every other bike on the track, and we are riding two different bikes. But what I would say with my gear pattern is if Mischa was to change his gearing to suit my gear pattern, I think he would find it easier. I think he's using a taller gearing, which means he uses more of the gears. So in this corner, he's in second and I'm in third. If he ran a slightly shorter gearing, or even just tried these gears to begin with, I think by using third gear, he would have less engine braking, be able to flow into the corner more and carry a little bit more corner speed. Because he's using second, it's slowing his bike down, and it's also making it more aggressive when he does get on the throttle. One of the most important things Mischa actually does here, which may surprise a lot of people, is he gets on the throttle before me. And I also explained this in my throttle control video, that when you open the throttle too early in the corner, all that does is it stops your bike from turning as sharply as it can. Because I keep the throttle closed for longer and carry my speed further into the corner, it means when I am ready to get on the throttle, I accelerate hard and I'm pointing down the track. What Mischa does at this point is accelerates a little bit too early, which means he runs wider in the corner earlier because the bike stops turning as much. And then at that point, when I'm fully on the throttle, he's not able to get on the throttle as hard because he's still leant over on the edge of the tyre where there's less grip. So we'll see that here. I've kept the throttle closed until this point, and then as I've left it longer, when I do get on the throttle, I get on the throttle a lot harder. So we see now I've got the bike upright and I'm beginning to accelerate up the track, whereas Mischa's still on partial throttle. We can see Mischa opens the throttle at this point, and now he's on a constant throttle, but I've still got the throttle closed. And then it's not until we get to here where Mischa is actually fully accelerating, whereas I've managed to get on the throttle from this point. So there's that, it looks like nothing, but that short amount of time where I'm able to stand the bike up and get on the throttle is where I'm gaining my time here. And now at this point again, I'm able to accelerate really hard down the hill. So you see my body position, I'm hanging right off the bike, and that means when I do want to stand this bike up, I can easily get the bike onto the bigger part of the tyre and accelerate hard. Now in this first sector, you can see on the timing at the top there, I've actually gained 0.6 just in the first two corners alone. And this is where the differences in racing, although it looks like nothing, it actually soon starts adding up. Now 0.6 can cover most of the MotoGP grid at any one time, and in British Superbikes a second honestly covers the top 20 for most of the season. So in those two corners we're already stepping a little bit further ahead. I'm now going to reset the timer as we approach the second sector that I've created here, so we can see again the differences on each sector. Now around this corner, Mischa was very similar to me, and this was one thing I would say about track day riding compared to racing, is the majority of corners, the mid-corner speed for a good track day rider and a racer is almost identical. There's rarely any difference between those two speeds. And that's where I think a lot of guys get confused, in that when they're trying to go faster, they're trying to find speed in the middle of the corner, and it's the most dangerous part to try and do it, because a motorbike can only go so fast through the middle of the corner. Where it can gain a lot of time is in the braking phases and the acceleration phases. One thing I touched on earlier though was our gearing. I think for Mischa and most track day riders, the gear pattern I'm using here, if you can change your gear pattern to this using the gearing properly, I think you'll find it a lot easier to ride around here. So Mischa's in third gear up over the top. I'm also in third gear. And then as I come down the hill, I'm in the nice safe part of the power, as is Mischa. But as I go in here, because I'm still in third gear, I'm able to carry more speed into the corner easily because I haven't got a lot of engine braking. Now because Mischa's gone back to second gear, that's pulling his bike up and slowing him down. And it might only be a very small amount, but it is an amount nonetheless. But here is again another place where I'm able to gain time. And the reason for that is I've got my bike stood up earlier in the corner. You can see I'm slightly ahead of Mischa here at this point, and that has come from that earlier rolling speed where I've stayed in third gear and not gone back to second. But at this point, I'm now standing my bike up, and this is where I'm gaining time as I accelerate up to the next corner. This is where I find a lot of track day guys can make time, and it's that transition from getting it up onto the big part of the tyre and getting the bike back to 100% throttle. This is something that takes a lot of practice and a lot of building up, and it's not something that you should just initially try and do. But that is the difference a lot of the time. It's good riders getting the bike up onto the middle part of the tyre and accelerating back to full throttle. A track day guy will tend to keep the bike a little bit leant over, accelerate partially, not all the way to 100% throttle, and that's where they're losing time. Because they're not getting the bike back to 100% throttle, that is where the few extra kilometers an hour increase, and then that speed is carried all the way to the next corner. And now I'm ahead again, and at this point I'm now carrying more speed. Because I'm staying in third gear and Mischa's in second gear, his bike now becomes a little bit snatchy. I'm in third gear and I'm able to carry a lot more roll speed through these corners. So although his line's very similar, I'm just carrying a little bit more corner speed throughout this next section. I also, in between these corners, I'm getting back to 100% throttle as quickly as I can and standing the bike up, whereas Mischa stays a little bit leant over, which means he's unable to accelerate as hard as I'd like him to. Now here's another important point. As we're going down here, I stand the bike up and brake hard earlier, so then I can release the brake and turn into the corner easier. You see now I'm getting it back onto the fatter part of the tyre so I can brake harder, whereas Mischa stays leant over the whole time, so he's not able to brake as hard. And now here again, if you watch my body, I'm standing the bike up, getting it onto the bigger part of the tyre, whereas Mischa's still leant over for a lot of this. And at that point, that's again where I'm able to accelerate away from him. That corner we've just been through, I stayed in third gear throughout that. I was playing with my gears there a little bit. Some laps I did go back to second, and some laps I went back to third. Generally, second is a little bit easier. So I come through those three rights, and then as I brake for the final bit, I backshift to second to help pull the bike into the corner. I was trying to use third to carry more speed in, but when you do carry more speed in like that, it puts a lot of load on the front tyre, and I did have a few moments where the front was chattering there. That went away when I did use second gear, but again, it does pull the bike up slightly more and you carry less corner speed through the middle of it. And that's where I gained 1.24 seconds just in 3 corners alone there. And all of that really was just about being confident, accelerating hard and standing it up onto the bigger part of the tyre and then braking more upright. All the time when you're fully leant over, you're not accelerating and you're not decelerating. You're also not turning as much as you can when you slightly crack the throttle. So it's really about being positive and closing the throttle, keeping the throttle closed, getting the bike turned and then accelerating hard and standing it up. So I'll reset the timer again and we'll go for the third sector here. Now, again, we've got a difference in gears. I'm in third gear and Mischa's in second, and that immediately is already carrying me more corner speed through the middle of this corner. If you watch my line here, I really try and stand the bike up as early as I can and drive hard all the way to the outside of the track. And at this point, I'm trying to keep the bike as upright as I can so I can brake harder all the way in here. As I turn into the corner here, I have to begin releasing the brake. Our lines again here are very similar. I try to keep as tight to this right hand side as I can. I run my wheels over the white line and that opens up the next left hand corner. So through the left hand part of this corner, I carry more speed through the apex and then stud the bike up as quickly as I can. This is actually a really interesting point in Mischa's riding where his bike becomes very unstable. Now the easy thing to think here would be that his bike isn't set up correctly, but I'm actually going to disprove that with some other footage I've got of Mischa. So that point alone there where Mischa was out the seat and having to close the throttle because his bike was bucking and weaving, you would think that his suspension is doing something wrong there. But in other videos I've seen of Mischa that I can show you here, his problem is more related to his body position, and this is something I see a lot of track day guys doing. That's when they exit a corner, they jump back into the middle of the seat far too early, and when you jump back into the middle of the seat, you lose all control over your bike, it loads the rear up more, and all of a sudden it will start bucking and weaving, and you just become a passenger. It's important to stay hanging off the bike all the way until you're upright and then move your bum back into the seat. What a lot of professional racers are actually doing as they exit the corner is moving their upper body back onto the bike, but their bum stays off the seat. Now, as you move your upper body back onto the bike, it doesn't upset the bike. You're then over the front, which helps the wheelie, and then once the bike's stabilised, you can then move your bum back into the seat. By jumping your bum back into the seat before you've exited the corner, it's just going to upset the rear and make it slide and move about. So as his bike has had a moment over there and it's been unstable, he's then lost a lot of speed over the top of here. So that's where I'm able to gain time in this section. This is where our gear pattern falls back into line and I go back to second gear to give myself maximum engine braking to pull the bike into the corner. But what I do here as I'm exiting the corner is something that you need to think about. So you can see now I'm already in third gear. Now you would think, why did I not just enter that corner in third gear in the first place? And the reason for that was I was going back to second to help pull the bike back with the engine brake. But then as I've gone through the corner, I already want to have a third gear so I can accelerate easier out of this corner. If I had the bike in second gear, it would be really snatchy as I begin to accelerate and harder to get around this right hand corner. I'm also now able to carry more roll speed as I've got less engine braking every time I close the throttle on the approach to the back straight. And this back straight is probably the most crucial part at Almeria. As you're approaching this back straight, it's the longest straight on the track, so you want to do everything you can to carry as much speed onto it and accelerate as hard as you can onto it as well. I mentioned earlier about Mischa's body position, and you'll see here the difference that that makes. So if we watch me first, I actually had a moment there, but I'm fully hung off the bike, so I'm able to control it. And I've actually gained 1.75 seconds in this sector alone on Mischa. But this is where Mischa's body position gets interesting, because I'm going to reset this here, and as you watch me accelerate, I'll be hung off the bike completely, which means I'm able to stand it up and get onto the fatter part, and I don't move back onto the bike until I'm completely upright. What Mischa does is accelerates through the corner, but jumps back into the middle of the seat, and you'll see how unstable this makes his bike. Is because he's back in the middle of the seat earlier, you can see the handlebars beginning to move here, and that's his bike pumping as he's getting towards the edge of the track. Obviously he's accelerating as hard as he can, and with this bike having traction control, what that bike will actually be doing is as he's accelerating but he's sat in the middle of it, the bike will begin to slide, and then the traction control will be saving it and it'll be coming back each time and correcting itself. So that's something you have to think about in these corners, is keeping yourself hung off so you can get the bike away from you, stand the bike up properly and accelerate on the bigger, fatter part of the tyre. There's actually one more thing with Mischa's riding here which is very important, and it's something he's learnt on the internet that I want to completely take apart, but I'll save that till after we finish this lap. Now there's a difference in gearing again here. You can see we're both in 5th gear, but he ends up in a tricky part of the gearing, and that's because he's not carried enough speed onto the straight. He's now on the rev limiter in 5th, but he only just gets to the rev limiter in 5th just before he's braking. So I imagine he doesn't want to click 6th gear because it feels almost pointless to do it. That's all come from not carrying enough speed onto the straight initially, that he's not got that extra top speed at the end. Now our braking markers here are very similar, but because I'm arriving at a faster speed to this corner, I'm slowing down from a higher speed, that I'll be carrying more speed the whole way into the apex. So you can see how early I committed to the corner and I released the front brake, which I'm scrubbing speed off the whole way into the corner. Now that is something that is so difficult to teach, and that only comes from years of riding, years of losing the front and knowing where the limit is. It's not something that you can just go out on track and do initially, but that's the theory behind it. That's what I'm actually doing. But as I said, that actually comes from years of braking, turning into the corner thinking, oh my God, I'm not going to stop, and just about making the corner. It also comes from braking, turning into the corner and losing the front and thinking that was the limit, I've gone too far. But Mischa's a track day guy. He's got brand new Panigale V4R. I don't expect guys to go out and do that. It's far easier crashing someone else's bike like I've done for a lot of my career. So that was the area where I've gained time here. Again, I've gone back to 2nd gear like Mischa, and coming out of here we both go 2nd, 3rd, which is the same. But you can see how quickly I commit from one corner to the other. In that last sector, which was just a straight and 2 corners, Mischa lost another 0.68 of a second. So that amounted to 4.27 seconds in total. Now there's one other thing here that I mentioned that I want to talk about, which is very important, and it's actually something that could be quite dangerous for Mischa, that I think it's very important that people learn about. In racing, the rear brake has become very fashionable and popular to talk about. It's a very important tool that people use at the top level of racing, and it's something I honestly don't teach on track days, because I think for 90% of track day riders they don't need to think about it. If you do want to learn to use it, that's fine, and I'm going to show you exactly where I would and wouldn't use it now. Mischa's read on the internet that it's to help stabilize the bike under braking, and what unfortunately that will actually do in the way Mischa's using it is make the bike more unstable. So I'm going to rewind here, show you the areas that Mischa's using this brake and where I would and wouldn't use it. So you can see, for people that don't know, on Mischa's left hand he's actually got his thumb brake there. It's the little black lever below his thumb. Now coming into some of these corners, because it's new for him, I think this was the first time he was actually using a thumb brake, he's unsure where he uses it. So sometimes you see his thumb go for it and sometimes you don't. So firstly, I'm going to show you the areas that Mischa uses it. And then secondly, I'm going to show you why I wouldn't use it in that area. And then finally, the areas that I would use it. So this is coming onto the back straight here. If you watch Mischa's thumb, he just has quite a few pumps at it. And that is definitely what I wouldn't do. With any input on the bike, it's incredibly important that you're smooth at all times. If you do anything aggressively, whether it's the front brake, the throttle, your body position, or the rear brake, it can do things that cause the bike to be erratic. By stabbing at the thumb brake like this, the bike will begin to react, and it might not be in a way that you want it to. The second place Mischa's using the thumb brake is onto the straight here. So you see his thumb going for it again, and he gives it one big stab and then another couple of stabs because he's not sure what's going on and he's not sure if that's going to fix his problem. His bike was moving about there and I can see his thumb thinking, should I use the rear brake here or not? There's one final area he's using it, which is down the back straight here on the brakes. Now if you watch his thumb, he's just pumping at this brake here. And Mischa's told me that's come from reading on the internet that it will stabilize the bike under braking. And this is where you have to be so careful with everything you're listening to on the internet, because motorbikes are dangerous and what you're doing out there really can compromise your safety. So although a lot of this is about experimenting and finding a limit and finding new techniques and skills to use, be very careful with whatever you're listening to on the internet. Firstly, that has come from someone that actually knows what they're talking about. Ideally an ex-professional motorcycle racer, not just me. There's Simon Crayfar, there's plenty of good guys out there, but please, when you're reading and listening to things on the internet, make sure it's come from a reputable source and not just a forum. Because what Mischa's done there is absolutely fine, because a lot of the time a thumb brake actually doesn't have that much pressure or power. But if he'd done that on the first lap and his thumb brake did have a lot of pressure, what that could have done is lock the rear wheel of his bike and spat him straight over the handlebars. So what I'm now going to do is show you the areas, if you are going to use the rear brake, I would use it and how to use it effectively. The first place would be on the brakes. Now, the way I used to use it myself was I would brake initially and then brake hard, and then as I'm releasing the brake, I would then get on the thumb brake to help pull the bike into the corner. I was only ever using the rear brake because as you turn into the corner and you have to release the front brake, if you then use the rear brake, it takes a little bit pressure off the front, and it means you can still brake hard going into the corner. If you carried on using the front brake hard into the corner, you would eventually lose the front. And that's the main area people are using it on track. Where this is so tricky and so difficult to teach people is that without you knowing, on any modern superbike, there's so many electronic things going on in the background. If you start jabbing at a thumb brake or your rear brake, all that's going to do is confuse all the electronics, because that bike is expecting the rear wheel to slow down in a certain way, and if you start interfering with the thumb brake, it will confuse itself and not know exactly what's happening. And that's why for 90% of Trackday guys, I just teach them to use the front brake. I've had a lot of races where my thumb brake didn't work or I've lost my rear brake, and I can still get around the track well within a second of just using my front brake. So although it can make you faster, for a lot of guys it just confuses the situation and makes it worse. The next place I would actually use the thumb brake is in the middle of the corner. So Mischa goes for the thumb brake here, and it's actually the correct place to use it if you are going to use it. So this corner, because you're leant over, you close the throttle and you're turning in, you can't really use the front brake because you're turning in with lean angle. So at this place, where Mischa goes for the thumb brake there, if you gently hold it, that will help pull the bike into the corner. What Mischa's doing wrong is he's stabbing at it quite a few times, and that's quite scary because, again, it could upset the bike and do something that you're not expecting. That should just be one smooth press of the thumb brake, gently at first and gradually increasing the pressure so you can react to what's happening. When you've got maximum lean angle, if you jab at the rear brake really hard, that has all the potential in the world to completely lock the back tyre and fire you over the handlebars. So really, it's lucky that it hasn't done that. I'll show you other areas on the track where I would use the thumb brake in this way, and the first corner is a good example. So as I play this here, I turn in, and at this point is where I'd now be getting on the thumb brake, and I'd have the thumb brake on all the way to this point until I get back to the throttle. Now here's another section of the track that you could actually use the thumb brake, which is coming off the corner. When you're coming off the corner on a 1000cc bike and even 600s, they begin to wheelie, and as they begin to wheelie, you can then use the thumb brake quite aggressively when you're upright to stop the bike wheeling. And at this point where the bike becomes unstable, if you hold on to the thumb brake, it will calm the bike down because it's effectively slowing the bike down and calming it. As it begins to wheelie and you hold on to the thumb brake, that will help pull the wheelie down. But as we say in racing, the throttle does work both ways, and if you don't have the thumb brake, rolling the throttle also brings the front wheel down too. And then the final place that you could potentially use the thumb brake, which is talked about a lot, is just before or at the point where you're grabbing the front brake. You use the rear brake to help take weight off the front. So as you're braking hard upright, if you use the thumb brake, effectively it takes some load off the front and means you can then brake harder upright. But that has to be done in a safe and smooth manner, not jabbing at the thumb brake like this. What Mischa's doing actually by jabbing at it is confusing the rear wheel. Every time he jabs it, it slows the rear wheel down. He lets go of it, it speeds the rear wheel up. This is all happening really, really fast, and the electronics on the bike are also trying to figure out what's going on. The other area that could be dangerous for Mischa is as he's braking, if he's braking hard and picking the back wheel up off the floor, if he jabbed at the thumb brake, it could slow the rear wheel down too much as it comes back down, and that could be a real issue for him. If you want to learn how to go faster, please check out my online courses and ebook where I break all of this down step by step. And if you want me to analyse your riding, send me your footage through my website and maybe you'll be in the next episode. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.